The loudest man in the room is often the weakest. That truth may sound counterintuitive in a world that constantly encourages you to speak louder, react faster, and showcase yourself more powerfully than others. But eventually you'll realize that true strength doesn't lie in noise. True strength is stillness. It doesn't need to prove itself. Stillness is not inactivity. It is the ability to do everything with deep presence and without making noise. While others react, the master observes. Power does not reside in uncontrolled actions, but in the ability to control oneself. This is the first truth and the foundation for the journey toward inner self-mastery. It's difficult to understand that because from a young age, we've been taught that emotions are who we are. We say, I am angry, I am sad, I am disappointed. But the truth is those are just states, not identity. Emotions come and go. They are like clouds drifting across the sky. And you are the sky. Unchanging, unmoved. You are not the storm. You are the space in which the storm appears and disappears. When someone insults you, challenges you, or intentionally provokes you, the typical reaction is anger flaring up like fire in your chest. Your heart rate increases, your breath quickens, your fists clench. And before you realize it, you've been pulled into that moment. But in that very moment, you forget the only thing that gives you power. You have a choice. Inside you, there is always a part, I call it the observer. That observer sees you getting angry, hears the voice in your head shouting, but doesn't shout along. It witnesses the storm, but doesn't become the storm. That observer, that is your true self. At the Shaolin Temple, the monks don't train to defeat others. They train to master themselves. Every strike, every breath, every moment of stillness is training for the mind. They observe instead of react. They watch the anger rise and let it drift away like a leaf falling into a stream. They understand that to master life, one must first master oneself. And to do that, they don't define themselves by fleeting emotions, but by the awakened awareness that watches everything with calm. When someone insults you or touches your pride, you need to realize one thing. Their words are just energy. What gives that energy its power is your attachment to it. You believe their opinion matters. You believe your identity needs to be defended. But the observer defends nothing because it has nothing to defend. It understands that silence is not defeat, but clarity. Ask yourself, who suffers when you get angry? Who loses control when you react? Not the person who provoked you, but you. You carry that fire inside, and you burn from within. In the end, you lose your peace, your clarity, and your inner grounding. When you live in the state of the observer, you are no longer pulled by outside forces. You no longer dance to the chaotic rhythm of others. You choose your own rhythm, your own path. And that path is walked with calm, not rage, with understanding, not reaction. Let go of the need to react in every situation. Let go of the need to be right. Let go of the illusion that emotions define who you are. Emotions are guests, not residents. Treat them with respect, but don't hand them the keys to your soul. It takes great inner strength to sit with anger without acting on it. It takes deep discipline to feel insulted and still choose silence over argument. It takes real inner power to sense the storm rising and still stand firm like a mountain. This is not suppression, nor is it weakness. This is mastery. This is understanding that you are not your emotions. You are the awareness behind them. You are the sky, not the cloud. And when you train your mind long enough to observe rather than react, you'll discover that nothing truly bothers you anymore, because nothing can enter your inner world unless you open the door to it. And when you live from that awareness, you move differently. You speak with less urgency and more purpose. You listen without needing to respond. You carry peace, not as a concept, but as a state of being. That is why the observer is not affected by chaos, because they do not resist it. They observe, they learn, and they let go. Your strength does not lie in what you feel, but in what you choose to do with that feeling. Every time you observe instead of react, you become stronger, you become steadier. And no one can shake a person standing firmly on the ground of awareness. So when anger knocks, when insults ring out, when emotions surge, remember this: you are not the storm. You are the still sky behind it all. Breathe, observe, and keep yourself free. The outside world is not the problem. Your attachment is. We grow up in a world that teaches us to be honest with our emotions, but never teaches us how to see through them. We learn how to identify emotions, but mistakenly believe they are who we are. We say, I'm a hot-tempered, I'm a sad person, I'm sensitive, as if our entire being is defined by a fleeting wave that has just passed. But the truth is, emotions are not you. They are merely passing phenomena in the mind, like drifting clouds in the sky. You are the sky itself. Vast, still, unchanging, and spacious enough to let everything pass through without needing to hold on. Imagine a day when the sky is clear. Gray, chaotic clouds may gather, but they too will pass. There might be storms, thunder, darkness, but the sky has never disappeared. It is never tainted by the clouds. It simply remains expansive and unmoved. That is your true nature. You are not the fear, the anger, or the anxiety rising within. You are the space in which these states arise and dissolve. When someone hurts you, insults you, or ignores you, what really happens? An emotion arises, perhaps pain, anger, betrayal. The heart beats faster, the breath shortens, the body tightens, the mind begins to react. But amidst all of that, there is still a part of you, a part that is not swept away, a part that simply watches. That is the observer within you. This observer does not judge, it does not resist, it does not identify with the emotion. The observer simply notices, this emotion is arising, and just like that, you create space, a space where you are no longer controlled, but begin to choose. In that moment, the emotion is no longer you. It is merely a visitor, and like all guests, it will leave as long as you don't cling to it too tightly. What makes emotions seem powerful enough to dominate you is not the emotion itself, but your belief in its reality, in its identity as you. When you say, I am angry, you have already merged yourself with the anger. But if you shift your view to, I am experiencing anger, you create distance, a small space between you and the emotion. And within that space, you find freedom. Emotions may come to you, but no one forces you to act on them. You can touch them, welcome them, observe them, learn from them, but you don't have to become them. You can be in pain without falling into despair. You can be sad and still remain grounded. You can feel anger without causing harm. Remember this: you are the sky, not the cloud. You are the solid foundation, not the shifting movement above it. And when you begin to live from that space of sky-like awareness, you will realize that you don't need to conquer emotions. You only need to recognize them and let them pass. No need to fight, no need to suppress. Just be present still, spacious and compassionate, like the sky that always remains despite every storm. Have you ever found yourself so angry that you almost couldn't control it? Have you ever noticed that there's a part of you quietly watching that very anger? If you've ever had that moment, even just for a few seconds, then you've touched on one of the most profound truths of life. Within you, there is always an observer. That part is not the anger. It's not the pain. It's not the complaining voice in your head. That part is simply watching, silently, consciously, without judgment, without reaction, without the need to be right or understood, just watching like a clear mirror, reflecting without being tainted. And you know what? That observer, not your emotions, is the real you. Try to recall the last time you felt yourself boiling inside. Someone insulted you, judged you, misunderstood you. You felt your blood rush to your face, your heart pounding, your fists itching to respond, your voice ready to argue. But then, maybe just for a brief flicker, you noticed, I'm angry. Just those three simple words, if truly seen from a place of awakened observation, are enough to free you from being controlled. You are no longer the anger, you are the one seeing the anger. And once you can observe it, you're out of the loop. You now have a choice. I know it may sound simple, but applying it is difficult, extremely difficult, because our mind is conditioned to react, to resist, to defend itself every time it feels under attack. And that's exactly why I want to ask you this genuinely. Have you ever recognized the observer within you? If yes, even just once, then I invite you to leave the number 1 in the comment section below. You might find it strange or feel a little self-conscious. I understand that. I know it can feel uncomfortable to express yourself in public spaces, but I also want you to know this. When you leave that number, you're not just helping me feel your presence, you're reminding me that I'm not alone on this journey, and I'm deeply grateful for that. Because every time I see someone leave a 1, I know that another person is waking up. Another heart is opening to the quiet depth within itself. And that gives me the motivation to keep writing, to keep sharing, to keep planting these meaningful lessons for more people to receive. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time to listen and to feel. Back to the observer. When you begin to recognize that part within you, everything starts to shift. You are no longer swept away by other people's words, no longer pulled by the need to be right, to win, to prove anything. You begin to see clearly. The person who speaks hurtful words cannot actually touch you unless you yourself open the emotional door to let them in. The observer doesn't need to win, doesn't need to explain, doesn't need to react, because it knows silence is not defeat, it is clarity. And when you live from that place where you are no longer chasing after every passing emotion, you truly begin to live in freedom. Not because the world outside has changed, but because you are no longer being controlled from within. And that is the greatest liberation of all. At the Shaolin Temple, monks do not dedicate their lives to learning how to defeat external enemies. They do not train to become victors in confrontations, nor is their aim to instill fear or force others into submission. They train themselves with each breath, each strike, each moment of stillness, not to hurt anyone, but to deeply understand and tame the chaos within. True discipline does not begin with physical strength. It begins with profound self-observation, and that path, though quiet, is the path to true freedom. You could train in martial arts for years, mastering hundreds of attack and defense techniques, but if you cannot master your mind when insulted, misunderstood, or faced with pain, then you are still being led, not leading. Every step, every movement the monks make is not meaningless action. It is disciplined practice of patience, of awareness, of mindfulness. They learn to stand still in silence, not to display outer calm, but to quiet the storm inside. In modern society, strength is often misunderstood. People think winning an argument means victory, that reacting quicker and harder shows real grit. But impulsive reaction is merely a sign of an undeveloped ego. In contrast, the ability to recognize rising anger and choose not to follow it, that is true power. The one who masters himself has nothing to prove. They understand that every external conflict is merely an invitation to witness their inner reactions, and from that observation, they cultivate true strength, the strength of choice. Not everyone realizes this, but every external victory is temporary. Winning a debate does not bring you peace. Retaliating against an insult does not make you mature. The real opponent you need to overcome is always yourself in the very moment you are tested. Self-discipline is not about running from emotion, nor is it about suppressing it with force. It is the practice of feeling without becoming, of touching without being swept away. When anger rises, the undisciplined are possessed by it, but the trained observer sees it, breathes through it, and releases it like a leaf falling into a stream. Emotions are not the enemy, but if you are not awake, they will take over and make you forget who you truly are. Mastery does not arrive in noisy moments. It arrives in stillness. In every moment you choose to observe rather than react, to be patient instead of combative, to take a step back instead of stepping forward merely to prove yourself. No one will see your inner work, but you will. And that is enough to make your every step more grounded. Self-discipline is a solitary journey. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't crave recognition. It doesn't make you stand out, but it makes you unshakable. Because when you've mastered your inner world, nothing in the outer world can manipulate you anymore. And that is the greatest victory a human being can ever achieve. In the moment you are insulted, a familiar instinct will rise within you. The urge to react, to respond, to prove that you are not weak. That's when your body tenses, your heartbeat quickens, and your mind erects its defenses. But in that exact moment, what you truly need is not a rebuttal, but a step inward. Because it's not the other person who is hurting you. It's you who is granting their words the power to touch your emotions. And you know what? That power, you can keep it for yourself. Words are just energy, but when you cling to them with ego, with the belief that you must be respected, must be acknowledged, you give them power. When someone insults you, they don't create the storm, they merely spark a flame. It is you, through your reaction, who fans that spark into fire. And the irony is, you don't just burn others, you burn yourself in the flames of anger. In this emotional game, the one who reacts first is always the one who loses power first. The observer within you, the deepest layer of awareness, doesn't need to defend anything because it knows there is nothing to protect. Your true identity cannot be touched by a word. Your silence is not weakness. It is a sign of inner clarity. I do not need to speak to be heard. I do not need to win to be myself. And that is a kind of strength that cannot be shaken. The question you should ask yourself is not, am I right? But rather, who is truly suffering in this moment? The honest answer is always you. It is not the person who made you angry who is in pain. It is you, because you carry the fire inside. Feed it with attachment and burn yourself in the blaze of lost control. What you lose is not just reason, but also peace, clarity, and the inner axis you once stood upon. Self-mastery is not the result of a meditation session or a short-term course. It is the accumulation of small, silent, repeated choices made every day. Every time you choose silence over argument, every time you choose to breathe instead of rage, every time you release the ego instead of clinging to victory. These choices aren't loud, but little by little, they are building a deeper, steadier version of you. You don't need to react to affirm your worth. You don't need to argue to defend your dignity, because true worth does not come from winning an argument. It comes from winning over the instinct to react. When you stand in the face of insult and remain silent, you not only preserve your dignity, you elevate it. And that is not defeat. That is wisdom. That is strength forged in silence, in awareness, and in the courageous choice to do nothing when doing something would be far too easy. True strength is not shown by how fast you react, but by how firmly you can stand in the midst of emotional waves. When someone says something that unsettles you, when injustice surfaces, or when unwanted criticism comes your way, what usually arises first is a reflexive urge to strike back, to defend, to reclaim control. But if you pause, take a deep breath, and simply observe the emotion without letting it drive you, then in that very moment, you've chosen steadiness over reaction. And that choice, though silent, is a form of power that no one can ever take from you. Your reaction happens when you allow the outer world to dictate your inner state. Someone says something, and you instantly respond. Something happens, and you're swept away by it. Living this way is like being part of a remote-controlled game, except the controller isn't in your hands. But when you begin to observe yourself, watching the shift in your breath, the tension in your muscles, the stream of thoughts, you create a small space between stimulus and response, and in that space, you regain your freedom to choose not to react, but to respond with awareness. To choose not to lose yourself in haste, but to stay grounded and calm. That is the choice of someone who lets go to preserve. letting go of the immediate urge to protect the long-term wholeness of the self. Letting go of reaction doesn't mean you are weak, passive, or resigned. On the contrary, it reflects a deeper level of initiative where you are no longer a victim of your circumstances, but the master of your experience. Strength isn't in having the last word, it's in choosing not to say the unnecessary one. Not everyone deserves your energy, not every situation is worth your attention, and not every word needs a response. When you begin to understand this, you stop being pulled into every conflict. You stop being carried away by every wave of emotion. You begin to choose, and that choice brings you inner solidity. The truly strong are not calm because there are no storms. They are calm while standing in the middle of storms and not being swept away. They are not governed by right or wrong, gain or loss, win or lose. They don't need to react in order to feel they exist. They are fully present, deeply, solidly, and that presence radiates a wordless steadiness that others can feel. When you live from that space, you no longer need the world to be gentle with you because you have learned to be gentle with yourself. You don't need things to always go your way because you've found a way to remain unshaken regardless of the flow. And then you will see the most valuable thing isn't winning an argument. It isn't making someone realize their mistake. It is keeping your heart at peace while everything around you tries to pull you away from it. Letting go of reaction is not surrendering your power. It is transforming it into the foundation for your maturity, your wisdom, and your true inner freedom. There is a simple truth that's hard to accept. It's not the outside world that hurts you, but what inside you has been clung to too tightly. Every time you feel anger because someone misjudges you, sadness because someone turns away, disappointment because your expectations are unmet, pause and ask yourself, what inside me just got touched? Most suffering doesn't come from the event itself, but from the story you tell about it. And that story usually begins with attachment. You're attached to your self picture, to being acknowledged by others, to the feeling of being loved, heard, or right. It's this attachment that makes you more vulnerable than anything else. Attachment isn't always obvious. It's not as loud as anger, nor as clear as tears. It's subtle, quiet, and threads its way through every expectation you carry. When you expect others to understand you, to act the way you want, to keep their promises, to stay, and they don't, the wave of disappointment that rises isn't because of what they did, but because a belief inside you collapsed. Others didn't break you. Your attachment to that belief is what made you fall apart from within. When you're attached to being right, you feel pain when you're challenged. When you're attached to being loved, you feel empty when you're left behind. When you cling to role, status, or accomplishments, you feel lost when they slip away. Every attachment is an invisible string that ties you to the external world. And when that world inevitably changes, you get pulled off balance from the stability you thought you had. That's why on the path of inner cultivation, letting go of attachment isn't indifference, nor is it the abandonment of love. Letting go means loving without possessing, being present without controlling, giving without expecting something in return. When you no longer cling to anything, nothing can drag you out of your peace. You don't need someone to stay in order to feel whole. You don't need to be recognized to know your worth, because your worth no longer depends on what others think. It lies in your ability to remain unmoved by it. True freedom doesn't come from the world becoming perfect, but from your ability to stop clinging to the idea that it must be perfect in your way. When you let go, you lose nothing. You're simply untying the cords that bind you to your suffering, and when you're no longer pulled by those strings, you become steady. Not because everything is right, but because you no longer need everything to be right. Not because someone stays, but because you no longer fear their departure. In that stillness, you don't avoid emotions. You face them head on and you are free. Nothing is under your control, yet nothing controls you. That is the kind of steadiness no one can give you and no one can ever take away. You will never be truly free if your inner peace still depends on something outside of you. Because the world is always changing, people come and go, praise turns into silence, the spotlight fades, If your serenity is tied to others needing to love you, understand you, or respect you, then every time they shift, you'll be swept away like a leaf in the wind. Attachment makes you think you're living, but in truth, you're just clinging to fragile illusions. Real love is not possession. True recognition doesn't come from outside. Real worth doesn't need to be proven. When you're holding on to something, you're placing the key to your freedom in someone else's hands. Letting go of attachment does not mean you become cold or emotionless. On the contrary, it is the purest form of love, where you can be with someone without needing them to stay, where you can listen without needing agreement, where you can give without demanding anything in return. Freedom begins the moment you stop needing everything to unfold your way. When you no longer cling to yourself, to outcomes, to people, you create space to live truthfully as yourself, uncontrolled, unbound, and no longer pulled by the fear of loss. There will be people who walk away from you, opportunities that disappear, things you once believed would last forever vanish into thin air as if they never existed. But you are still here, you're still breathing, you are still you, whole and complete. And that's when you realize your existence does not depend on external circumstances. When you let go, you don't lose, you return to yourself. No longer torn between the past and anxieties about the future, you begin to live like a river, not resisting, not clinging, not stopping, just flowing. In that letting go, you don't retreat from life, you move deeper into it. You feel each moment more vividly because you're no longer afraid of it passing. You love more fully because you're no longer afraid of losing. You are more present because your mind is no longer distracted by expectations. This is freedom, not from having everything under control, but from not needing control at all. It is the moment you stop gripping and begin to truly live. Wherever you place your attention, your energy will follow. Focus is not merely a skill, it is the very source of conscious living. Most people don't feel drained because they're doing too much, but because their energy is silently being siphoned away by scattered attention, a meaningless criticism, a petty argument, an unexpected phone notification. These small fragments constantly pull your mind away from your inner center, leaving you adrift without even realizing it. When your attention is fractured, energy leaks. And when energy depletes, you feel tired, unmotivated, lost, despite no major events happening on the surface. Those who live deeply are not the ones with more time, but the ones who protect their focus like a sacred treasure. In this noisy world where everything fights for your eyes and emotions, focus is the final freedom you must hold on to. Every time you react to something unworthy, you lose a piece of your energy. Every time you worry about what's beyond your control, your mind drifts into the void. But when you consciously choose where to place your attention, you are shaping the quality of your life. Focus does not mean forcing yourself to operate at high intensity. Sometimes it simply means pausing to take a deep breath. It means being aware of what's happening within you rather than being swept away by what's happening around you. It means continuing your important task while distractions blow past like wind without turning your head. It means looking at someone and truly listening, not just waiting for your turn to respond. Focus brings depth, and depth gives every experience its meaning. On the path of inner cultivation, without focus, every lesson remains a passing concept. But with focus, with true presence, even a single breath can become a retreat. A moment of silence can become an awakening. Because through focus, you connect with yourself on the deepest level. You reclaim your scattered energy. You plant yourself firmly in the soil of the present moment, and from that place, you live not through reaction, but through intention. Focus is the torchlight in the chaos. Whoever holds it doesn't just walk steadily, they shine. We often mistake stillness for passivity, for doing nothing in a world that's always in motion. But perhaps that very misunderstanding is what causes so many to overlook one of the most quiet yet profound sources of strength, the ability to be fully present without being swept away. Stillness is not the absence of action. It is a form of action that operates on the deepest level. It is the choice not to react, not to retaliate, not to grasp. And that very choice of non-doing is in itself an act of courage. While others rush to say the first thing that comes to mind, the still person waits until words truly need to be spoken. While others act quickly to prove something, the still person remains grounded to observe what is actually unfolding. They neither run away nor surrender. They remain deeply, clearly, and firmly present. Stillness is when you don't need to win an argument to feel worthy, when you don't need validation from others to know you're doing the right thing, when you can hear an insult and remain unmoved because you understand that truth doesn't need to shout, and in that non-reaction you are engaging in something vital, you are protecting your inner power. The still person is not lacking motivation. They simply choose not to waste energy on what is undeserving. They do not let momentary emotions drive them. They understand that a fast reaction is not better than a right one. And to arrive at the right one often requires silence, a step back, and space to see deeply into what's really happening. In a world full of noise, stillness is an act of courage. It doesn't come from weakness, but from an inner life that no longer needs to prove anything. You no longer have to win. You no longer have to speak. You only need to remain grounded, to see clearly. And from that clarity, if action arises, it is an action rooted in wisdom, not in reflex. It is an action that carries weight, not because it's loud, but because it comes from stillness that has been refined. Stillness is the choice, not to chase every wind, not to be swept up in every wave. It is the art of mastery, the root of true maturity. And once you grasp this power, you'll realize what makes you unshakable is not speed, not volume, but the depth of a mind that knows when to move and when to remain still. No one can act wisely when the mind is in chaos. You may do many things, move quickly, speak constantly, but if your actions arise from a place of inner confusion, the result will often be exhaustion, misdirection, or collapse. On the other hand, when you begin from a state of stillness, even the smallest steps become grounded. Stillness is not procrastination or laziness. It is a deep inner anchor, a place where you connect with clarity so that your actions are guided by steady conviction rather than outward noise. Like a mountain that doesn't need to move to prove its strength, the still person needs no noise to display their power. They are simply present, grounded, and that presence alone speaks volumes. Stillness is the soul's testing ground. If your mind is restless, you won't be able to sit still for long. If your heart is full of confusion, silence will feel suffocating. But if you dare to sit, to breathe with the inner tremors, to witness every emotion without being swept away, then in that very act, you are cultivating the roots from which all future actions will grow. You don't always need to do something to prove that you're progressing. Sometimes the most powerful turning point is the moment you stop, listen, and connect with the deep quiet inside. The one who can remain still in a world that's always rushing is the one who understands that action only holds true value when it arises from awareness. If you react out of fear, you're just repeating old patterns. If you run out of fear of being left behind, you're still being controlled by emotion. But if you act because you've seen clearly, because you've understood, because you're grounded from within, then every step becomes a silent yet powerful affirmation. You don't need many words. You don't need to convince anyone. The stillness in your soul is the loudest truth you'll ever speak. Stillness is not a destination. It's something to be preserved along the way. When you learn to return to inner steadiness before you step into outer action, you're laying the solid foundation for everything you do. From a clear mind comes precise action. From a calm heart arise compassionate decisions. And from an unmoved spirit begins a life that is no longer tossed about, but led by deep understanding and true freedom. There is a quiet power that most of us have forgotten, the power to choose how we respond to life. We often believe suffering comes from others, from criticism, from betrayal, from unfair circumstances. But if you look deeper, you'll see Those things are just neutral events. What causes pain is the meaning you attach to them. Someone remains silent and you feel dismissed because you've clung to the belief that you must always be cared for. A critical remark is made and you feel wounded because you've tied your self-worth to external approval. Every form of suffering in the end doesn't come from the world. It comes from your inner permission for it to hurt. You can live in the middle of a storm and still remain at peace if you don't let the outside wind uproot your foundation. Circumstances do not create emotions. It's how you receive and interpret those circumstances that gives rise to all feelings. When you understand this, you reclaim a power you've always had, the power to choose, to hold on or to let go, to react or to remain still, to suffer or to learn. No one can truly hurt you unless you hand them that power. No life event can truly break you unless you are clinging to an expectation it just shattered. Freedom doesn't lie in a life that always goes your way. It lies in not needing life to go your way in order to feel at peace. When you release the expectation that others must behave a certain way, that circumstances must bend to your will, that life must be fair by your own standards, only then are you truly liberated. No one holds the strings to your emotions. No event holds the power to reroute your inner compass. You're no longer dragged by what's beyond your control. You've returned to stand firm on your own ground. Look back at your past pains and ask yourself, was it the event that hurt you or your resistance, attachment, and expectations surrounding it? When you see this clearly, you stop being a victim. You become the one holding the key. And with that key, you can choose. Release anger, keep peace. Let go of judgment, hold compassion. Drop control, embrace freedom unless you allow it. And when you stop allowing it, nothing can touch the steadiness of where you now stand, because then you no longer live like a leaf, you live like a rooted tree.